Okay, so here's the thing about H2O Footprints in the Sand. It's an absolute garbage fire of an anime that no one should watch, but in order to explain why, we have to talk about it. So I'm going to present events in the order they actually happened instead of the order they're shown in the anime, because, dramatic tension and stuff don't really apply here. Now, obviously, we're going to be getting into some detail here, and normally I would say, spoiler warning, and you shouldn't continue if you... No, we're not doing this. No one should watch this anime. I'm pretty sure it's given me brain cancer. At any rate, we've got to build a timeline. So, right off the bat, there's basically 3 names you need to know. There's the Hirose family. This includes our main character Takuma, his dead mom, and as a result of marriage, his dad and uncle. They're supposedly wealthy, or at least their Takuma's grandfather is wealthy, but, we don't ever see any of those people, and Takuma even remarks that he grew up poor and couldn't afford to ever travel or, really do much. So, wealthy, maybe, but they're not wealthy. They're just related to people who are wealthy, and if those people don't love you enough to share their wealth, it's not important. We'll get into how unimportant it is later. Then you've got the Kagura family. This is composed chiefly of Grandpa Dickbag, and we're going to call him something different every single time because he doesn't have, nor does he deserve to have, a consistent name. And his granddaughters, Hinata and Hotaru. They are actually wealthy and pretty much in charge of every part of this rural farming village they live in out in the mountains of Japan. Lastly, you've got the Koinata family. We don't really get to know much about the adults in this family except that they were doctors and, supposedly, they were very greedy and let a bunch of people die because they couldn't pay for services anymore as the Koinata family had already drained the village of all of its money. Although they're also accused of trying to burn the village to the ground and blamed for the suicide of someone at one point, so what is and isn't true about them is never really kind of ironed out. Anyway, if I'm going to place all these events in the order they actually happened, there's no place to start other than the eloping of Takuma's parents. Takuma's mom had been promised by her parents to marry into the Koinata family in one of those forced arranged marriages for influence and power that, every lazy romance writer seems to default to. You know the ones. Well, Takuma's mom decides, nah, I like this guy's older brother, so we're going to run away and we're going to have a kid. And by the time the Hirose family finally caught up to them, Takuma was already a thing, so they were like, damn, I guess we've got to acknowledge this marriage or whatever. So we'll tell the Koinatas that we failed to force our daughter into a marriage with them. The Koinatas took this news rather personally and tracked down the young couple for seemingly no reason other than to torment them, though the specifics of this are never elaborated on. So time passes, and back in our rural country village, Grandpa Douchenozzle's 2 grandkids are being given characters. The older of the 2 is shown to be studious and diligent, while the younger of the 2 is shown to be bashful and childish. This is, of course, unforgivable because by the time a girl is 5 years old, she should no longer be coloring with crayons and should instead be brokering business deals, at least in the opinion of, Grandpa Chris Brown. But it's cool because the older one really likes this storybook that her younger sister has drawn out, even though it doesn't have an ending yet. What is that story? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask because it's somehow treated like a prophecy, so I have to go into it any damned way. So, the younger granddaughter, Hotaru, has drawn out this little fairy story about a girl who looks like her older sister, Hinata, but is her own entity called Odaha, and Odaha meets up with the Promised One, who's a young man, and his, destiny is to help reunite everyone in the village so that they can be friends again, even though, historically speaking, there is no evidence that they were ever friends to begin with, but whatever. Anyway, short time later, these 2 are playing around in the woods picking flowers when the older of the 2, Hinata, slips into the river and drowns, instantly. So, this lack of an heir situation causes Grandpa Hitler and the Nazi bunch to push a identity crisis onto an approximately 5-year-old Hotaru because, well, I'm not really sure. we had like a 9-year-old girl die, which is, tragic, don't get me wrong. But the Kagaras are pretty well sure this means the end of their family and the whole village, even though they've still got one living granddaughter, and the fact that we're forcing daughters into arranged marriages and stuff tells us that, they're not exactly treated like, proper citizens anyway, and more like, trading cards. So women aren't typically in, this culture considered to be heirs to anything. So I'm not sure what any of this was meant to accomplish, but basically he forces Hotaru, the younger of the two granddaughters, to abandon her own identity and tell everyone that she is her older sister, Hinata, something that only Grandpa and his closest allies, probably also within the Kagura family, and, anyone with a set of functioning eyes that realize, oh, hey, Hinata suddenly got 4 years younger, whatever. They're going to be the only ones who know this. Everyone else is going to think that Hotaru was the one who drowned and died, meanwhile Hinata continued to live, but in reality, it's Hotaru pretending to be Hinata while the real Hinata went on to become a ghost. Oh yeah, did I mention that? Anyway, next on the timeline, we've got a maybe 8 or 9-year-old Hotaru living her life as Hinata, known only to the few people in her own house, and becoming friends with the daughter of the Koinata family, Hayami, who are living across this bridge just outside the village. The friendship is, for some reason, enough for Grandpa Asshat to order the villagers to go and burn the Koinata family's house to the ground, and the villagers actually went along with this because Grandpa, the human equivalent of asbestos, owns most of the land in the village. And a handful of families were mad at the Koinatas about relatives who had died from lack of medical care, and I couldn't tell you. But ultimately, the arson was a teaching tool so that Hotaru/Hinata would learn not to go making friends that Grandpa didn't like. It's very stupid. Oh, and I should also tack on that Koinata's apparently just up and leave their approximately 8 or 9-year-old daughter homeless on a mountainside because they just vanish from the story at this point. Like, they're not dead. Like, in the flashbacks where everyone is in front of the burning Koinata household, like, the daughter, Hayami, is there with her parents, who are, doing the whole anime, like, kind of monochromatic and blurred out in the background, but they're clearly there and they're clearly related. So they didn't die in the fire, and the villagers, as far as it's ever explained in the story, didn't, like, put their severed heads on a pike outside of the bridge as a message. No, they just leave. They say, well, we're not wanted here, we're going elsewhere, and our daughter is gonna stay and become a mountain hobo. So that's fun. So, anyway, feeling weirdly responsible as a preteen, Hayami decides that the only way she can bear the weight of her family's sins is to become the oftentimes literal punching bag for the town. So she lives alone in the woods in some abandoned, like, mountain gondola carts like you'd see outside of a ski resort, and pretty much sticks to herself and her growing list of emotional and or mental disorders. Are you with me so far? Okay, so we're almost to the point where the show starts. You remember that Hirose woman who ran away from her arranged marriage and gave birth to our main character, Takuma? Cool, so we're gonna need to get her hit by a train. I'm talking like bullet train, to the face, evisceration. But we can't just have this happen under mysterious circumstances. This needs to happen directly in front of Takuma. In fact, let's have a scene that we'll flash back to later where she lets go of his hand so she can go run in front of the bullet train and he'll actively watch the carnage. Now, watch is an important word because it's really, really critical at this step in the process to establish that Takuma can see. He has 2 giant eyes that are a whole football field apart, and he can see. But somehow, despite seeing his mother run headfirst towards an approaching bullet train, he manages to not see the little girl or boy or kid or something that Takuma's mom was trying to push to safety, ultimately sacrificing her own life for that of a stranger's. Well, push to safety might be a bit up in the air and open to interpretation, but we'll get to that far later. Anyway, he was so hell-bent on not seeing this kid, in fact, that Takuma appears to have subconsciously made the vow to himself that he would go utterly blind as a result of the unbearable sadness about his mom, who he had convinced himself was depressed and suicidal despite remembering her exclusively as a cheerful woman. By the way, I've checked WebMD, there is nothing in there about going blind from sadness, but, whatever. This is the least unbelievable thing you're going to have to deal with in the scope of this story, so just come to peace with it now. Okay, so recapping the timeline so far. We've got a blind, either middle school aged or about to be middle school aged Takuma, one dead anime mom, a never pictured on screen anime dad who decides, screw having a blind son, I'm not gonna deal with this, I'm gonna get his eyes looked at, and the doctors were like, well, there's nothing wrong with his eyes, it must be some kind of illness. You should probably send him somewhere that isn't handicapped accessible, like at all. Like a mountain farming village in the middle of nowhere. That'll probably do the trick. And in traditional anime parents not giving a shit about their children outside of suicidal sacrifices, cliche, the dad swiftly bows out of the story forever and sends Takuma to live with his uncle in the middle of nowhere. And it is here, 20 minutes into the unedited raw recording, that our anime actually starts. So the first thing we see is Takuma. He's roughly 14 years old, blind as shit, running full speed through a forest away from a rampaging boar being dragged along by a blonde girl that only he can see, who turns out to be the ghost of the older Kagura granddaughter. Not complicated at all, I know. So, as to keep this video shorter than the Roman Empire, I'm going to abridge a lot of stuff in the first few episodes of the series so as to, really consolidate it down to just the trace bits that matter. For the bulk of the first episode, we establish a few important facts about the world Takuma now lives in. Number 1, rural middle school aged Japanese girls love guys who are blind and have no personalities. Number 2, everyone in town outright hates Hayami, the mountain hobo daughter of the Koenada doctor family, and she tries her absolute best to encourage Takuma to keep his distance from her, which he completely ignores. Both Odaha, the ghost of Hinata Kagura, and Hinata Kagura, who is actually the younger sister Hotaru that everyone thinks is dead, refers to Takuma as the Promised One. And 4, about 2 minutes before the end of the first episode, Odaha gives Takuma his ability to see back. So the whole being blind thing is gone out of the story. So, Ghost Hinata/Odaha guides Takuma on a series of seemingly random events to hopefully get Hayami, the girl that we're just going to call Sad Girl now because it's easier, and I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing this name any damn way, to be treated better by the town, and Hinata, who's really Hotaru... Alright, screw this too. From this point forward, she's just going to be class rep because... whatever. So anyway, they've got to get class rep to realize that she doesn't need to live a lie anymore and pretend to be her dead sister. So over the course of 10 episodes, it's a long and difficult fight. Lots of fan service, numerous gropings, a gender bend reveal, a weird filler episode thing where everything is a wacky fever dream and numerous characters who don't matter. And by the midpoint of episode 10, we're basically where we need to be. Sad Girl and class rep are friends again, thanks to Takuma, thanks to dead older sister. Ghost Odaha girl thing. Due to class rep's influence and slowly getting to know Sad Girl, most of the kids in the village are no longer treating Sad Girl like a literal demon. Class rep has revealed her true identity, which, despite being a big enough deal to force a literal identity crisis onto a 5-year-old girl no adult ever acknowledges or cares about, including Grandpa Hates a Lot, so the whole thing kind of got tossed away like a mini arc that the writer forgot about, but, didn't matter because it didn't add anything to the overall progression, so whatever, I guess. Screw me, right? Anyway, Sad Girl gets her house burned down again by angry villagers for literally no reason, forcing her to move in with Takuma and his uncle. So Grandpa Genital Rot finally does get upset when he learns that Sad Girl and Takuma are in a relationship instead of Takuma and class rep, because this ruins his chances of ever uniting the Kagura and Hirose families. And yes, that's still the really frail skeleton on which this story is built. Anyway, he sets out to do what any reasonable adult would do, and by God, he's going to put an end to this middle school relationship between two orphans once and for all. And how does one shake the rock-steady and time-tested grounds of a relationship between two 14-year-olds, I hear you ask? Well, it's simple. You tell Takuma that Sad Girl's family is the reason that Takuma's mom killed herself. This despite the fact that every single shred of evidence aside from Takuma's own delusions about the event should really point to the reality that she didn't kill herself and in fact saved, asterisk, a young kid from being hit by a train, so Grandpa Ass Hornets would never have even guessed that he could use the event as fodder for emotional manipulation. But hey, whatever. Takuma is like, I don't care what Sad Girl's family did, that shit's not on her. But yet he still went home and asked his uncle, and his uncle, despite, again, the reality of the situation that they would have found either one body on the front of a bullet train and a young child on the other side of the bullet train with a traumatic story about how some woman pushed him to safety and got eviscerated, or, you know, two bodies on the front of a bullet train. And in any case, neither of this leads very well to the story of suicide, but, you know, again, that doesn't matter. It's fine, because the uncle was like, yep, that's basically what happened. Even though you lived in the city with your mom for approximately 12 years and never saw anyone mistreat her or remember her, you know, as being depressed, and actually go out of your way to describe her as always being a bright and cheery woman, yep, she was driven to suicide by cousins or some shit to your new girlfriend. Who cares that it doesn't make any sense and it required more coincidence than the average numerologist needs to start buying extra tinfoil? It's fine. So, naturally, this causes Takuma to start going blind again. Yeah, that's a real thing that I just said. Legit, he starts going blind again, and that's got him stressing, you know, as it would. And he has a nightmare about Sad Girl dragging his mom in front of a bullet train, so he lashes out and causes her to run away in the middle of a hurricane and release her frustration on a small wall of sandbags that were blocking the bridge she needed to cross. Quick aside, by the way, because she's about to get the ever-living shit beat out of her Office Space printer style for messing with these sandbags as if she's attempting to flood out the entire village. Yeah, nah. These sandbags are literally just stopping people from crossing this bridge. Like, it's on screen. Like, you can see that, right? Like, they make no difference to the safety of this village whatsoever. But whatever. She's gonna get beat to hell and back because she's self-destructive and doesn't want to, you know. I don't understand. I know a lot about anxiety. I know a lot about depression. I took 3 semesters of psychology, and what I can tell you is that this is not how people behave. Even hormonal 14-year-olds, like, no, makes no sense. But whatever. Takuma stops going blind for a moment, seeks out Sad Girl, who just got her ass beat, so that he can apologize. She rejects his apology and says some really mentally unhealthy shit about how she's just like her family and that Takuma should really just release all the anger and hatred of having his mother stolen from him. And, like a true gentleman, he accepts this offer and proceeds to beat her even more before he passes out thinking that he killed her, triggering one hell of a panic attack. So, at the same time, Grandpa Mao is telling his granddaughter class rep that she can be Hotaru now, not that his permission means anything because she's literally been Hotaru for 4 episodes by this point, and I think this was more like the writer remembering, oh shit, like maybe at some point Grandpa should acknowledge this, but whatever. Anyway, she can be Hotaru now, and she should really start macking on that soon-to-be single Takuma. So, Takuma wakes up after his blackout panic attack to discover that he can't see anymore. And here's the real kick in the teeth of this story, and I promise you, I'm not making this up. He could never see. all right? That's the Fight Club moment they've been building towards this entire damn anime. Let's completely ignore the fact that during the course of this anime, he's repeatedly accused of peeping, something a blind person cannot by definition do. Let's ignore the fact that he's waved to people on distant hills. Let's ignore the fact that he's been navigating literal mountainsides completely and utterly alone without his cane, where one misstep could have seen him drown as swiftly and fatally as Class Rep's older sister. Let's ignore the fact that he swam at one point, badly, but still. Let's ignore the fact that he saw Sad Girl on a hill one time from like half a mile away, and then he climbed that hill to go talk to her. Let's ignore the fact that his teacher made him participate in an art class where they went outside to paint scenery. Let's ignore the fact that he navigated fine, completely blind, for the past many months, but now that he's super mega ultra blind, he can't even find his way from the bathroom or from his room to the bathroom without help. Yep, sure. Let's ignore all of that and say that, everything we've seen up until now is an unreliable narration through the eyes of his own personal delusions, because if I don't, then none of this makes any goddamn sense at all, and I can't make this shit up. It's so stupid. It's not a good twist. If you want a good twist anime, watch the first episode of Gakuro Gurashai / School Live, depending on what you want to call it, from beginning to end. The first episode, beginning to end. Do not read anything about it. Just go watch it. You'll be thinking to yourself, oh, this is a cutesy slice of life, 4 girls in high school thing that I don't care about. Trust me, if you want a good twist, go watch that episode. I will be here to accept your apologies for ever having doubted this recommendation. But whatever. We're not actually talking about good anime right now. We're talking about a really terrible twist. So let's just shelf all that for now and proceed on with this convoluted clusterfuck nightmare of a drama. Takuma is blind. Always has been. Well, not always. Ever since his mom died, but whatever. It's cool. It's fine. I'm fine. Really. Grandpa Carpeted Bathroom approached Takuma's uncle and is like, so I called Takuma's grandpa because, all grandpas know each other, and I told him what's going on, and he's really pissed to hear about the condition of his grandson, even though his grandson is basically fine and just beat the ever-living shit out of his girlfriend, but whatever. He's already upset because he lost his only daughter to the Koinata family, and he refuses to lose his grandson, so he wants Sad Girl gone, excommunicated from the village. Oh, and by the way, so do all the adults in the village. Takuma is now too blind to walk across the house, so he's powerless to stop Sad Girl from leaving, and proceeds to go straight crazy and convince himself that he's hallucinated the whole experience so far. As you do. We're talking the whole school experience, all of his friends, everything. He thinks that none of it's real. So he goes out on a 4 a.m. craziness walk while Grandpa Halitosis and 2 villagers hunt down Sad Girl with rifles. Oh yeah, did I mention? This is now attempted murder. They're no longer willing to just let her walk out into the woods, leave the village, excommunicated forever, and get eaten by bears. No. Let's shoot this 14-year-old girl for some shit that she literally never did. But cool. Alright, whatever. Anyway, Takuma comes across this scene and somehow manages to get in the middle of it and stop her from being shot with, a rifle, which is some real Daredevil-esque shit from a kid who couldn't cross a room, 2 minutes ago. But if we've learned anything about Takuma at this point, it's that even the slightest variance in his mood affects every single aspect of his physical body. I suspect in one of the OVAs, he's disappointed to learn that, his supermarket won't accept coupons and he ends up in a wheelchair. But don't think that just because he's stopped a literal attempted murder that he's off the crazy train. No. Far from it. He now thinks that Sad Girl is his mom. Yep. That's where this love story headed. But, don't worry. It's gonna double down. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's an alright trade then. He was never blind while his mom was alive, so surely if he thinks that she's back, he'll forget all about his sadness-induced blindness, and nope, still blind. Why? Fuck you. So, we've got one episode left, not counting OVAs. How are we going to repair this train wreck? Place your bets now, because I swear you are not gonna see this shit coming. So, the quickest play-by-play I can give is that class rep calls the cops on her grandpa, then confronts him with her plans to report everything once the cops get there. Everyone scrambles to come to grips with Takuma's new flavor of crazy, and the doctor that they take him to suggests that everyone just play along with Sad Girl now being his mom. You know, the thing that no doctor would ever do. Meanwhile, back in the village, class rep, who barely mattered to this story as anything more than a chess piece for Grandpa McNasty, along with all the other characters who don't matter at all, deal with chasing away the press, who are strangely interested in the perceived power struggle of a small rural village with at most a double-digit population. But as is the catchphrase for trying to synopsize this anime, whatever. Sad Girl has decided to move to Tokyo in Takuma's old apartment and take on the role of Takuma's mom, despite the fact that they're both, again, 14 years old. But before they leave, Class Rep and Sad Girl have a touching apology farewell on top of the mountain where Sad Girl has had 2 homes arsoned at this point. So, off they go to Tokyo. And you start thinking to yourself, you know, this may be weird as shit, but maybe this isn't too terrible. Like, Sad Girl gets a place to live where no one hates her. She still gets to be with Takuma, albeit in a weird, creepy way, and she even gets a bike route as a paper delivery girl. So she even discovers, you know, from his weird child roleplay that she still exists in his memories as Sad Girl, though it's completely separate from her current existence as his mom. And, you know, that's enough to lift her spirits for a little bit. And this might not be a super terrible situation for her, and, you know, maybe he'll come around in time. Yeah, about that. So she has the great idea, several weeks at least into this whole mother-son situation, to break the illusion and ask him if he still thinks his real mom abandoned him. And she chooses to have this talk right in front of a railroad crossing whose alarm sounds sent him into a panic fever state. Then, just as happened some year or 2 or 3 ago, a small reckless child chases a ball onto the railroad tracks, and Takuma's mom, this time played by Sad Girl, runs out to save him, getting eviscerated by the bullet train in the process. And this is where we should really clarify that she did not really save this kid. She didn't, like, push him out of the way of the train or anything. She just ran over and hugged this weird stranger little boy. And if anything, all that did was keep him from getting out of the path of an oncoming train and doubled the fatalities for no understandable reason except to force Takuma to remember the full picture of how his mom really died and, you know, expose the truth, which is somehow powerful enough to restore Takuma's eyesight just in time to see his girlfriend mom get obliterated in an expensive insurance claim. So yeah, that's a thing that just happened, but don't worry about it. We're going to cut back to the village now and time skip forward some indiscernible amount of time to when everyone is young adults. And we're going to roll the credits over some character closure scenes. What sort of character closure scenes, you ask? Well, let's check in on Class Rep, who's now in charge of the village and way less evil than her grandpa was. Aren't you happy to, you know, close out that important loop in the story? Oh, the bull-headed farmer girl who I've managed to do this entire summary without mentioning? Well, she's doing fine. So is their generic friend anime girl number 2, who, despite only ever at best being a background character, was always treated like she was a potential main character, like she's in like the lineup of girls at the ending slate of the opening theme. She's, you know, given lines of dialogue. she's treated like she's going to be somebody important one episode, but she never gets an arc, and I literally had to dig around on Google to find out that her name is Maki. Well, anyway, Maki's got a kid now. She apparently ended up with the crossdresser who, as an adult and father, is still dressed as a maid and working in a candy shop, so, whatever. Good for him. Living his best life, I guess. Honestly, more of a sensible arc than literally anything we've seen so far. Takuma's even moved back to the village with his 2 fully functional eyes, and he now works with his uncle. And despite being an adult now, he's still voiced by a woman. But you know what? That's too normal. We can't have this wild-ass ride end on something as normal and mundane as everyone moved on with their lives despite a whole bunch of fucked up shit happening. No. Instead, a literal human child, who happens to be the reincarnation of Otaha, or whatever, the ghost older sister of class rep, runs out of the woods and knocks Takuma to the ground, saying some shit about how hard it was to convince the fairy world to let her do this, then instructing Takuma to, quote, take care of her this time before she runs off, leaving Takuma thoroughly confused, and if he's still the Takuma we've come to know, probably 2 minutes max away from having some sort of mental breakdown that'll require him to be put into an iron lung. But before he can do that, Sad Girl reappears. Alive, well, reincarnated, uneviscerated, and I'm sorry, what the absolute fuck? What? Like, no. Okay, no. If the whole Otaha thing wasn't a trick of Takuma's delusional mind, then why the hell should we accept that he was blind the entire time? Or should we instead see Sad Girl and Otaha reappearing not as the uplifting, yay, happy ending that it's so clearly meant to be, but instead as this dark, foreboding, psychological horror thing because, obviously, insanity is re-manifesting itself in Takuma's molded cottage cheese brain. Like, if Otaha had the power to convince fairies, I guess, to bring people back from the dead, then honestly, it seems like getting 2 14-year-olds to go on a date was kind of the most ineffective use of her powers. And, like, whose kid is she? Alright, fine, this is getting nitpicky, but she runs out of the forest, her mother calls out to her, Otaha! And she calls back like she's clearly still in possession of all of her memories of being a ghost and working with Takuma when he was younger. So, like, did she just come out of this womb of this unknown woman as a fully articulate infinite and look up at her mother? Like, so, thank you for birthing me, but it's vital that you name me Otaha, as I just don't know how to answer to anything else, and, I need you to not leave this village until I'm at least, 10 years old, because I need to meet up with someone and do some very serious fucking necromancy. I don't know. I hate this. I hate all of this. Do not watch this garbage. I know that there's a manga I refuse to allow within contamination distance of me, and maybe it's a fundamentally different experience. Or maybe the original author was just so garbage at their job that they kept writing themselves into circles and out of, tight corners that they pin themselves in with ridiculously convoluted scenarios that neither respect the timeline nor contribute to it, or respect reality, or medicine, or logic, or the critical thinking abilities of the reader. You know what? I know less now than when I started, so just don't put yourself through this, all right? I've now had to watch this anime multiple times for the sake of this video. I bore this cross for you, and it's going to take me a long time to forgive myself for that.